What's up, everybody? It's your girl, El Rochelle, here for Hardwood Diva Sports News of the Week for the week of December 6th. So, we've had a lot of interesting stories going on this week. Actually, just got a text about some more interesting news. We're moving by the minute with this breaking news. But first up, I just want to talk about one of the biggest stories of the week, which is the passing of former South African President Nelson Mandela at the age of 95 yesterday. It's a huge story around the world, of course, for all of the implications. Nelson Mandela is probably one of the last of those true civil rights leaders that we've seen in that golden era, the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s around the world. Also because Nelson Mandela actually had a huge part to play in a lot of sporting events that went on in South Africa. South Africa, of course, for 30 years was banned from a lot of sporting events because of their apartheid system, just kind of their segregationist system against the native blacks and other races in South Africa. However, with the release of Nelson Mandela, then working, him and F.W. de Klerk working together to build a more racially equal state in South Africa, they were actually able to get a lot accomplished. One of the hugest things that he was ever able to do was bringing the country together with the rugby team. Rugby was known as this very predominantly white sport, and a lot of whites at the time weren't sure kind of what was going to happen with this, new bringing in of the black people in the state of the government. Folks weren't sure how they were going to fit in anymore. In 1995, with the Rugby World Cup in Johannesburg and the South African team winning, he actually came out and celebrated the team and basically said that this is South Africa, we are all South Africa, and that was very helpful in bringing the country together. Another thing he was a huge part of was bringing the Football World Cup to South Africa in 2010. He actually came out at the end and spoke with, kind of waved to the crowd, and it was a huge, huge moment for South Africa, put them back on the world stage. There are so many things we want to remember him as. He's a former boxer. Of course, he was a person that believed in equality for all. But most important, we do want to remember he was a freedom fighter. He was definitely one of those people that was about not only, he wanted to make sure that all peoples were free, and that didn't matter where they were, what countries they were in, and what regimes they were under. I always want to make sure that we are not limiting people's accomplishments and just saying, peace and love. And, a lot of that was very important later on in his life. But a huge part of what he was doing was making sure that the people of South Africa, all of them, had freedom. And whether you were considered colored or Afrikaan or black or white, he wanted everyone to be equal. And that was a huge part of the reason he was in jail for 27 years, the reason he was then released, and then a huge part of why South Africa became what it was under him. So we want to just say rest in peace to Mr. Nelson Mandela. Second story that also came out yesterday was Jameis Winston. We've been having this issue of a sexual assault case for him. It came up at the end of 2012, kind of got buried, and then it was re-established in November of 2013. So we had a conclusion to the case yesterday. The state's attorney let everyone know that they would not be filing charges against Jameis Winston, mainly because they didn't have substantial evidence. And the burden of proof, of course, is heavily on the prosecution in situations like that. And there was just very little they could prove. It's unfortunate. Rape cases they're a sad story because there's a lot going on usually in these cases. There's very few rapes are actually people intentionally accusing someone of doing something they didn't do. There's often a lot of miscommunication when it does come to rape, and just a lot of misunderstanding for those that are from the outside looking in, and even those that are involved in the situation. So I don't believe in victim shaming. If they want to put out her information, if she agrees to that, that's fine. But otherwise, I don't think we should be doing that. And I think we should simply move on. We should go on to, okay, he wasn't accused, he wasn't charged. But let's not demonize the victim, and definitely let's not, put him up on this higher pedestal as if whatever happened wasn't some sort of very interesting sexual situation. There was a lot there. I didn't really like the press conference from the prosecution or the state's attorney. It was very weird, very unprofessional, a lot of laughter and smiling and smirking. I just don't really think that goes. This is rape is a huge, huge, huge problem. And we want to make sure that we're not belittling that and forcing more victims to not come out when there are situations like that happening. So I wasn't a huge fan. I'm glad that if he's not going to be charged, it is finally taken care of. I also don't believe we should be victim shaming, demonizing her. Let's move on. This is not an easy thing for her in her life. People definitely for some reason believe it's really easy, and it's easy on your soul to accuse someone of rape. Rape is probably one of the most underreported crimes in the world, and I think we should be mindful of that and understand this is a hard time for her, and there are maybe some things that she's confused about too that have happened. So moving on, Jameis Winston isn't charged. He is now, of course, able to go after the Heisman, with this case not being on his back, and possibly go on to the BCS championship with his Florida State Seminoles. So there you go. So a couple of things. One thing that just came in. So there's this huge thing. Robinson Cano was asking for quite a bit of money from the Yankees. The Seattle Mariners seemed to be the only team that was interested in giving him anything close to what he wanted. And the Yankees picked up Jacoby Ellsbury from the Boston Red Sox. And that definitely made people think, okay, this probably isn't going to work for Robinson Cano in New York. And just as we suspected, breaking news alert just came in that Robinson Cano and the Seattle Mariners agreed to a 10-year, $240 million deal. Also, this is right after, hours after people are vilifying his agency, which includes, of course, Jay-Z, and talking about the shucking and jiving and hustle and flow that they're keeping up in trying to get more money from the Seattle Mariners. I find it very interesting how people are vilifying Jay-Z. It's a lot of these old guard folks that aren't exactly used to hip-hop's interference in some of these traditional white boys club type scenes, like agencies and communications and media, things like that. If you're really interested in finding out, you should read Steve Stout's book, The Tanning of America. It's actually very interesting, and it definitely speaks to situations like this. But congrats to Robinson Cano for $240 million. If I can find somebody to pay me $240 million to do something I love, then we will all be very happy people. So I say more power to you, brother. So let's see. We also have a couple of coaches moving around. SC hired Steve Sarkisian, former assistant coach under Pete Carroll at USC during the 2000s, and former University of Washington coach, actually, as in last week, was their coach and claimed he wasn't after the USC job and wasn't interviewing for it, and then miraculously, hours later, he gets the job. Crazy. Well, he is an LA born and bred boy, so it's no surprise. He is definitely thought of highly in the recruiting circles around the Los Angeles area, so that actually is no surprise. USC is always looking to get a coach that, of course, is great at recruiting in the area, because LA produces great football talent, and they definitely want to get back to the level that they were with Pete Carroll. So of course it makes sense that they would hire someone that was a part of that Pete Carroll era. Now, to replace Steve Sarkisian, we're now hearing that Chris Peterson from the Boise State team is actually going to be the head coach there. Now that's very interesting because originally he was one of the front runners for the USC position, and then we start hearing stories that, oh, he didn't want it and wanted to stay at Boise State. I'm also hearing, though, that the AD for USC actually picked Steve Sarkisian over Chris Peterson, and Chris Peterson was very interested in the position. I don't know how that is. I personally would have gone with Chris Peterson. He does an amazing job at recruiting to Boise, Idaho from Los Angeles area. He does a very good job. And they've had amazing teams over the last, 10 years. 8 seasons that he was there. They've done really great, and I think their last 2 seasons are where they had the most losses in their entire time that he was there. So I think this is great for the University of Washington, and I definitely understand you're wanting to move get into one of those BCS held conferences like the Pac-12, so that makes sense, and we'll see what he can do with the University of Washington. It should be good. Also of note, after his antics last week, Mike Tomlin was fined $100,000 for his interference in Jacoby Ellsbury's run back of a kickoff. Bruh, stop. We know you did it on purpose. It's okay. You got fined. You better pray they don't take a draft pick. I think that's going overboard. It's really not necessary to do all that. But it is what it is. So there you have it, folks. Those are the top news stories of the week. Let me know what you think. Holla at your girl in the comments. I will talk to you on Monday. Deuces.